You know, you reminded me, and there's an economist at Harvard wrote a very interesting book about artists. And he basically mapped out the value of artists' paintings when they painted them. And one of the things is because artists traded very publicly, people know this. And what they found is that there were two schools: artists whose earliest works were the most valuable and artists whose latest works were the most valuable. It looks like a bathtub. And you're either in one or the other. And, you know, one of the questions that when I looked at that book that I thought about is that, sure, with clicks we'll find the Picassos, but we may miss the Van Goghs or the Kandinskys who took a long time to develop. And that's, you know, that's always one of the things that we, you know, whenever you juxtapose hard measurements with instinct or gut, or however many years it took BMW to be able to, with confidence, articulate something like it could take 15 years to do it. That's very hard in the onslaught of all of this data.
We will still be able to use measurement to help us in that process, though. And I think, first of all, even without measurement, addressability is going to be a great boon. We manage to spend $75 billion a year on television now. Presumably it works. Consumers are buying product. We continue to spend it. So if we can just make better decisions, like having creative versioning to talk to people in an individual neighborhood, we're going to improve the responses. But I think we can look at the exposure to a BMW ad and see how it's influenced the perception and attitudes towards people that have been exposed to it. And we can start to learn about which different types of creative or which different groups respond best to those ads. And that will improve the efficiency by which we sort of deliver the impressions. And the effectiveness obviously is going to be, you know, a lot of creative associated with that.
Do we have time?
I wanted to add a comment. When you were talking about Harvard, it reminded me of a Harvard business case that was in Harvard Business Review, and it was about promotions. If brands are built over years, why do we measure them daily or, you know, on a monthly basis? And it would talk about the detrimental effects of measuring sales data, particularly tied to promotion and what it does to a brand and erodes a brand. And there's numerous brands that have gone out of business because they measured sales data as their only measure. So one of the things we've tried to do at Wachovia, and something that my group is evangelizing, is always have a brand equity measure in there. And it's tough because each product manager is only as good as their last quarter results. And so you've got to convince them that there's a longer-term view and it's for the good of the company. But I think you need to have both measures in place.
So at Wachovia, I mean, obviously financial services led the CRM revolution, but now you're talking about brand equity. How do you balance that internally?
Well, I think it's, like I said, I think it's we recently had a brand manager who was very skilled in that area, and so he did a lot to educate product line people about the value of brand and what it's going to do for their products over time. Because before it was just, you know, you always had to do an allocation, and it's just like giving at church. You just had to do it and get it over with. But now, you know, it was convincing them that it was actually adding value to their bottom line, and then actually we were able to convince them to add more in because of that. So I think you have to have a smart brand education program, and you have to show the results over time.
You know, when I listen to a lot of you, what it keeps coming back to me is, to get this moving, there's going to be a lot of leadership needed, because some of this is just going to be too complicated, and there's going to be a little bit of acts of faith and things like that. So I'm curious, you're given the keys to addressability at Suddenlink now. Do you think that's going to build a strong enough case that advertisers will then follow?
So I always like to start with my own products, right? And we actually have inventory to sell, but we also have a product to sell. And I do think that by starting with ourselves and by demonstrating the value of that, it'll be a lot easier to take out and sell to other folks.
Do you want to go ahead?
No.
Well, I was going to go back to the question I'd asked you earlier, which is, you're hearing all of this. Are you thinking, geez, when I get back to New York, I got to retool the organization?
Whoa. Even before this, we began the retooling, amazingly enough. No, you can't be structured the old way and expect a different result. I mean, there's the idiocy of having an idea and then keeping the structure the way it was. So we have changed the way that we work, and we're reducing what the media planning and media buying functions were in favor of having a much more connected relationship with the media owner that allows you to experiment differently, and you got to do that. And you know that we've invested in working with different models because we have to be doing that. You have to continually reinvent yourself or you end up dead.
Is there someone, I'm curious, who you think runs this business? In other words, is this business driven by the MSOs, by Project Canoe, or is it driven by media buyers? I mean, we hear a lot of different things. Dan, you want to?
I'm going to take a shot at that, which is, I think that's a great question. And I think ultimately, to steal an analogy, we're all going to be in the canoe together, right? And I think everyone right now is in the phase of the market where everyone says, okay, I'm the big dog, and I'm going to leverage my advantage to win. But the reality is, unless we come up with something where all sides benefit, we're going to leave a lot on the table. And I actually believe today we're in the mode of everyone's trying to win, and maybe they got one friend they'll take with them, right? But now we got to get to the point really where this thing is going to take off, where all of the three major stakeholders say, okay, we all have beachfront property. Let's figure out how we develop it and make it more habitable.
Yeah, what's the process that actually comes to be?
God, I don't know. I mean, that's like the Mideast peace problem. I am Israeli and Iraqi, so I guess I can opine on that. I have no idea. Look, I think just to go back to this inventory piece, a major part of that triumvirate is, in my mind, has not been participating to the degree required. And that's not their fault. I just think that the content providers need a version of Canoe, at least in standard setting, at least in developing a shared point of view on what are the products that matter for my marketers, for my advertisers, what's the business model that's going to work for me so that then they can have a common front in conversing with because they're just too important a stakeholder, and I think that's a important element.
So first step is the content owners to organize themselves in the way that the MSOs have.
I think so, and look, there are many, many voices around that table that have very different points of view, and there are like segments. Arguably the cable networks are much more alike than the broadcasters, because the broadcasters have to worry about the local affiliates, and their business model is frankly in trouble in this model. So I think it's about finding the like segments of content providers that can, at least in a small way, right, and Carol and I have talked about this, form common points of view. I think that'll help advance the conversation.
Caroline, you think it's happening soon? CBS, NBC, cats and dogs living together as one?
I don't. I was at a recent cable executive meeting, and I had suggested, because Yael and I have talked about this a lot, I suggested that we should partner, a few of us together, to bring creative versioning to the marketplace, so that once Canoe has this capability, we don't have 9 different cable competitors trying to talk to P&G or whomever to convince them that they should do creative versioning, because really maybe the big win is to get P&G as a partner to 9 of us and run across all of our networks and do a big, big campaign. I just thought that was a better way to go to market. I didn't get a lot of receptivity to it.
And why?
I think it's a few things. I think they're very skeptical of Canoe. They don't know if it's really going to come to fruition. They're skeptical of the demand in the marketplace. It's not like when you go visit an advertiser right now, certainly given the economy, the first thing that comes out of an advertiser's mouth is not about addressable advertising or creative versioning. It is, I have a mandate by my CFO to hit this quarter number. What are you going to do to help me get there? And that's where the conversations are right now. So I think it's a demand question in their mind. I think it's a Canoe viability, and when will that happen? And then third, I would say the business model is still really dysfunctional. I mean, we've done several addressable or interactive advertising campaigns, and it's expensive for us and for our advertisers. They have to pay for the new, specific creative. Then the MSOs want a fee to use the bandwidth. We ideally had wanted a premium on our CPM, but we didn't do it for the first couple of ones to get them going. Everybody wants money out of this.
That's where we started out with.
That's where we started. And you know what? The advertisers are not going to increase their budgets exponentially to let everybody in this sandbox suddenly make a killing. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why we're not organized. I wish we were more. I mean, McKinsey was instrumental in getting the cable operators together, and my offer still stands.
Time for an intervention?
Get us together. I don't know if an intervention. I just think it's a different sense of urgency.
Well, it's funny, too, because I think that every conference we used to go to before it became penny, the sky's falling, was the consumer's in charge. And if we look at it from the consumer's perspective, it's not like they're really missing this. we think we need to deliver this because we think there's money in it. But they're not out there saying, you know what, I want my television to do something different from what it's doing for me now.
I think that's, I can challenge that. Let me challenge it. In the sense that people are looking for more choice in terms of discovering their content. So if you look at the user behavior, the fact that Hulu is so successful, a lot of TV content is getting viewed online. I think people are voting with their feet or remote control, how you want to call it.
I don't disagree with that. It's just that they're not saying, boy, it's a real hardship for me to have to go to a different box from the one that I'm used to consuming media from. Yeah. It's okay with them. And we can't always expect them to create the need before we develop it, but we're not desperately trying to catch up with a consumer ask.
Did you want to?
No, I think that, I do think that the user is in charge in the end, because at the end of the day, if you don't have the user engaged with any advertising medium, the ecosystem is going to fall apart.